Hi, I'm Rusty Wise with the Wise News Network, and today on Wise Wednesdays, we have a very special guest, my dad, Hillard Wise Jr., and he's going to talk about the history of Cherryville and his history of the area and himself. Welcome, Hillard.
Thank you, Rusty. It's so good to be here on this. It ain't no beautiful day for sure. It's a rainy day, but life goes on whether it rains or not, and it's so good to be here. I had a wonderful childhood, I thought, growing up. I was born in Lincoln County. I was born in the big house behind the Bethpage Lutheran Church out at Bethpage. And the house is still there today where I was born. And back then, Dr. Hauser, Forrest Hauser in Cherryville, came out and delivered me. My dad, we moved to Cherryville when I was in the first grade, and we lived on 1st Street over here in front of the old ice plant, the first house on 1st Street. This was around 1941, 42, 3. My mother died, I'm thinking about 42. At age 30, my mother was about 32 years old. She was Ava Strap Wise. And she grew up in Cherryville, and her mother was Essie Wise, and her daddy was Doc Wise. She had Aunt Suni was one of her sisters, and Aunt Ruby. Uncle Hector Strap was one of her brothers, and L.S. Strap was her brother. And but after our dad died, me and Joe, my brother, Joe's 3 years younger than me, we had to have somewhere to live, so we lived with Grandmother Strap on Dixie Street in Cherryville. And we lived there long, and when I was in, 5th grade, I believe when my mother died, and we lived there till my dad remarried. He remarried about, 5 or 6 years later after my mother died. And he called us, he took us over to his home on West Church Street. And I lived in 2 houses above where he took me and Joe over to live with him and our new mother. And we lived there while I was going to high school. But things come to me a lot naturally, they did. I didn't have to study as hard as a lot of people, but I was an honor student, and I was proud of it. And I was a member of the Beta Club. We didn't play sports. Our dad had a block company in Cherryville. It was located right below where the library in Cherryville is now. He had a block company. It was just an open building where they made cement blocks back then. There was several years there, cement blocks were real popular. And he had a block company. And me and Joe had to go there after school and carry out blocks, and we didn't get to play sports. And I played Little League ball. When I was a young boy, I played Little League ball for the Howell. Had nobody working there, but I had friends over at the Howell Mill, and I lived close to the house, so I spent a lot of time over at the Howell Mill and took my first shower at the Howell Clubhouse. The Howell built such a nice clubhouse. It was #1, and that's where we took our first shower. And then years later, they demolished it and tore it down. But when I was going to school during the summer, we had coaches that worked with us boys. The football and baseball coaches, Mr. Quinn, Erskine Carson, and Hence Quinn were sport teachers in school, baseball, football, basketball. And in the summer, they worked with us. They had a job working with us boys, and we played ball in the summer. At that time, we had a Howell restaurant. Called it the Howell, it's Howell Doopstad or something, but it was a nice restaurant over at the Howell. It had good food, and anybody living today at my age can remember we had some wonderful food over at that Howell Mill.
Growing up, I know you were a paper boy and you delivered
I delivered
eggs
papers. I delivered a Cherryville Eagle for 5 cents, And we got 3 cents out of every nickel. I delivered the Gazette. I delivered the Charlotte Observer. I was a young boy that wanted to have me some money in my pocket all the time. And I did, because I sold chickens and sold papers, and I done any kind of odd job, cut grass for people. And back then with the old push mower.
Oh, reel mower?
Yeah, what it was, when you went over that reel mower, then you had to go back with a sling and cut down the high weeds, you know. And,
now, didn't you deliver live chickens in bags, and you cut the top off?
My dad sold. Back then they called them frying chickens. He raised these chickens, and when they got to be about a pound, they called them a fryer, and they sold them for $1 a fryer, for $1 a chicken. My dad was in that business, selling chickens. Me and Joe, growing up at Grandmother Strap's and Aunt Sunny's and Aunt Ruby's, we was over, I guess, about 5 or 6 years. Back then, we had cherry trees, fig bushes. We picked cherries and they baked pies.
Oh, off the cherry trees?
Off the cherry trees. They were blooming. They were bountiful. It had figs, cherry trees, and then we'd go blackberry picking. We went with the black welders. Tut Blackwelder and her mother and my grandmother and Aunt Sunny. We'd go down to Blackwelder's farm. That's on the way to Kings Mountain. They used to own that farm down there where you turn the curve there. And we'd go down there every year, pick blackberries, and the women canned blackberries, made blackberry pies. And Lord, Aunt Sunny used to make they called a Japanese fruit cake, and I've never seen another one like it. Some of my cousins, probably Wade and Martha John Blackwelder and Jude and Jane, they might remember some of that, you know.
Now, you talked about like coming uptown here in Cherryville.
Yeah.
Like we're in the museum now.
Right.
Do you remember when the city hall was here?
Sure, I went uptown. I went upstairs when they had court.
Oh, okay.
They had court like once a month, had a courtroom upstairs, had a judge. They tried, you had a jail downstairs. And one of the judges was Robert Carpenter. Robert Carpenter had a boy, Bobby, was a year older than me, was one of my friends that I grew up with. He was a good friend of mine. And lo and behold, his dad finally committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
And his mother worked for the post office. Leila Carpenter was a famous name back then, Leila Carpenter. She run the post office.
Now, here in downtown Cherryville, they had bus stops and train stops and
Bus stops was at Allen's drugstore. And then the train stop was down at the depot, but Mr. Will Brown, Presbyterian, all those Browns Presbyterians, he was the head of the train. He was a depot agent. And he had a pickup truck, he had a big flatbed truck, had one driver that he hauled and picked up like the Bean Boy does. That was the only thing in Cherryville that picked up.
like hauling gravel and stuff like that.
And you wouldn't believe, back over at the post office where Fish Box is, that was a building supply. Below there was a building supply building, and the train track come right by there. And Mary Beam from Cherryville, Mary was into hauling, bulldozing, and he had a Beam Builders Supply. He sold this like Ferguson, sold cement, sold all kind of building products, and that's where you got it. Sold sand, gravel, anything you needed like that. And then Dad had that block place, which they sold blocks, and he had a good block business back then because so many things was building structures was started off with brick. You had block with brick, you know. I got into the plastering business. My dad brought me up in it when I was a young boy. He'd take me with him. when I was a young boy out of school in the summer. And he taught me that trade. And I was in that plastering business, I guess, 15 years, I reckon. And I loved plastering. And there was a lost trade. People, sheetrock come along and put plastering out of business. See?
Well, while I was looking around in the museum, I found something over here that you might recognize. And it's a fireproof lath and plaster interiors by H.B. Wise and Son.
I had them.
912 West Church Street, Cherryville, North Carolina. And then the phone ID, they only had one number.
I know that.
One number, 6122.
I had some of these at home.
Yeah, and so this was in the museum downstairs, and I saw it down there, and I thought you might recognize it.
Yeah, it is, sure. I remember it.
So we'll stick it here in the background.
What we done, we had these made and we stuck them out in the yards. I was uptown a lot because I lived across the railroad track. And back then there was 2 open buildings out the street here. You just walk straight through, across the railroad track. You didn't have to come all the way around. I bet we had at one time 10, 12 taxis. They parked across from home folks. There was a lot over there where they parked. We had a diner one time, you've seen a diner like a bus.
Oh, yeah, dining car.
We had one of them dining cars.
Oh, really?
In Cherryville.
Where was it?
It was across there from home folks in that lot there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we had it there. And taxis parked. There was a vacancy back out the street out here. There was 2 or 3 buildings that wasn't here. You could walk across the railroad track, and some of the taxis parked there. And then we had a place out here. The post office was from the post office was always there, and Beatty Strap was the first buildings. And there's a great big open lots where we call them the riding devices. R.C. Lee riding devices came every year.
Like a carnival.
It was a carnival. It had a roller plane, you know. And they always put it right next to the post office, and you thought you was going to hit it, you know.
Oh.
And it was a big thing, the carnival, R.C. Lee. I never will forget the name of it. And they'd put posters on the posts around, you know, advertising it.
Well, I saw a lot of the old pictures, they had like the big day. What was the big day? Was it like one day a year they had?
Well, the big days uptown, you know, at Cherryville, when people come to Cherryville on Saturday, they didn't even drive in the streets. There's so many people walking. You parked elsewhere and walked up and down the streets. I've seen pictures of old pictures, the whole street's full of pictures. People walking.
Well, I know Cherryville, I've seen pictures, but they had movie theaters, bowling alleys. You didn't have to go out of town.
We had 2 theaters at one time, and right here was the Carolina that burned, and about where home folks is now was a Strand, S-T-R-A-N-D.
Okay.
That was the Strand Theater. And then lo and behold, here come the new Lester Theater. Out there where the gazebo is,
oh, yeah,
that building there,
yeah.
That was the Lester Theater. And it was named after Lester. This Dr. Lester's,
okay.
That's where they got the name Lester Theater. The Selfs built it.
Okay.
Lester Self. And see, Dr. Self was a doctor. He had an office upstairs here, and the big Self home is still over there today. Okay. You know, I think somebody just moved in it recently.
But the buildings downtown here, they all have upstairs, but years ago, most of the buildings did they have stores up top too? Did you walk up?
Harrelson Department Store, Belts, had merchandise upstairs. And just like Belts or Harrelson's, the ladies' clothes were upstairs.
Okay.
And downstairs, they had tables, they just had new pants just laying on the tables. You picked them up and tried them on, you know. Hillard Harrelson was the man that run Harrelson's. Hillard Harrelson was his name. He had a teacher, Ms. Harrelson was one of my teachers. And he lived at that time, he lived on Elm Street. And the old man Henry that really owned it. He lived in that big house on the other side of.
Across from like the Rome Italian.
Yeah, right there.
The Kendrick brick house.
No, across the road.
Okay. Now back then there used
There was two big houses, Kendricks.
Well, there was a foundry in Cherryville, and there was a brick.
Yeah, foundry, sure.
The foundry, and also
Is that building still there or not?
I think there was a building there.
It was, you know.
The foundry, then also a brick company, Kendrick Brick. Wasn't there?
Sure, these brick around here, it's where they come from. Kendrick Brick started in Cherryville.
Where was the plant? Kendrick Brick plant. Where did they make it?
I never did know. I didn't know about where no plant was. It
had to be nearby, I guess.
I know it, but they called him Fat Carpenter. He was the only employee for the city. He drove the fire truck. He stood right out there every day and handed out power bills.
Oh, people got their power bills. They handed them out to them?
Well, what they done, they saved that many. The ones that didn't get them there, they took them to the post office.
Oh, okay.
But he might, in a week's time, he might give out half of them and then have to mail them.
I guess did people come here to pay their bills, I guess, their power bills? They came in here to pay
No,
them?
they didn't come by here at all. You paid out the post office.
Oh, okay.
But they just come by here and they just handed it to them.
Oh, okay.
And he was a fire truck driver. But
Cherryville had a lot of car dealerships too. It had a Ford, a Chrysler, a Chevrolet. I mean, it had everything that you could possibly want and never have to leave the town.
Oh, we did. We didn't go to Shelby or Shaw. We couldn't go to Shaw nowhere. We'd go to Charlotte, Willamette Swimming Pool. You look it up sometime. Name of it was Willamette. And it was between Gastonia and Charlotte. And you paid to go swimming.
Okay.
See?
Like Belmont area.
Yeah, it was, and they called it Willamette was the name of it. And they had cages there. You pull your clothes off, locked them up, and went swimming.
Okay.
And they'd take us over in a bus or truck or something, see? And the Howell Mill, and didn't have nobody that ever worked there, but there's friends of mine. I went swimming with them.
Well, Cherryville was built basically off the railroad, of course, but the mill villages.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
Cherryville was built off the mill villages.
See, we had the New Way down there, and I never will forget my grandmother Strap. She said it was called a sardine mill. Sardine was the name of it years ago.
Why sardine?
What's the name of it, Rusty?
Okay.
The sardine mill. I don't know.
Okay.
But
had the New Way, the Dora, the Carlton, the Reinhauser.
1 and 2.
1 and 2?
Yeah.
That was a mill?
Down here's number 2.
Oh, Dora 1 and 2.
No, Reinhauser.
Oh, okay. Reinhauser.
It wasn't one Dora mill.
Okay.
There's 2 Reinhausers.
Okay. How many mills were in Cherryville at one time?
Oh, about half a dozen. And the Carlton was number 1.
Oh, okay. It's the largest.
It was and they had a big, nice clubhouse. And did you ever see their clubhouse?
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And what was so great, every year they had a fair. Called it a fair. Women baked cakes and pies, and they had a contest.
Yeah, I was a lifeguard at the Carlton before they tore down the building and all. I was a lifeguard at the Carlton Mill pool. Now it's the city pool, but I was actually a lifeguard there. Do you remember, like plastering, go back to the plastering? I know people still want you to do repair work now.
Oh, yeah, there's the plastering. Back then, what we done, me and my dad were in the plastering business, H.P. Wise and Son. We built, when a house, they was several years there in the fort, when a house was built, it was plastered. They'd call us. Mm-hmm. We got so much per yard, so we didn't have to go bid. We didn't have to go, count up and tell them how much it was. They knew how much it was on the counter. They knew how many yards was in that house they was building, and we done it so much per yard. And they knew how much it was gonna be when we started, see? And
I know there's plastering in this building, and they're working on repairing it now upstairs.
Yeah.
And So when sheetrock, I guess, came out, then that pretty well
See,
plastered.
my
went
dad
away.
was a plasterer. He worked in Charlotte for C.W. Kirkland Plastering Company. As far as I know, it was still there a couple years ago on Moreland Avenue.
Now, you mentioned Grandpa. Let's go back on the Wises a little bit. I know I've got, let me grab this. And, I've got this family tree, and of course,
It's not a tree you don't know about, do you?
No, it's...
What happened to our grandfather, you know?
Yeah, you can tell that. It don't matter. But I was going to bring up some names, and I know you know who all it is. But
We had Havners and Hallmans.
but we had Hillard Wise Sr., which was your dad, and then
Right.
we had Ulysses. Now tell us a little bit about Ulysses.
The only thing I ever knew about U.S. Strap, it was on the mailbox. His dad, see, before I was born.
Yeah.
But I always remembered on Uncle Norman, that was my dad's brother. He was older than Dad, and he lived to be old age. On his mailbox was NC Wise.
Oh, okay.
And then on my grandmother's was U.S. Wise.
Okay.
And I remember that to the day.
Well, tell us a little bit about
it was a tragic happened.
the neighbor incident. The incident with the neighbor.
Well, yeah, what happened?
It's a newspaper article that was in the Lincoln paper.
Right.
Well, tell us a little bit about that.
Dad, it said my grandfather had got some upset about some problems with some people, you know, and he was drinking, and he set the house on fire and run everybody out of there.
But did he have an argument with the neighbor?
His grandfather was Mr. Holman. That was his wife's daddy. Lived down the street there in front of the church. He come up there and he hit him in the head and killed him.
Well, the newspaper article said he cut his head off with an axe.
I know it said that. It said that was his grandfather. That was his father-in-law.
Yeah. Okay. It wasn't his neighbor, so it was his
No, it was a neighbor too. They lived down there.
Okay.
A neighbor.
So he went over there and chopped the guy's head off, and then
They went down there and got Mr.
and then
Holman.
killed himself in the house.
They went down.
That's what the newspaper article said.
They went down against the Holman. Mr. Holman come up there and tried to cool him down. See, he was drinking and wild.
Okay.
And he and our grandfather killed him.
Well, the newspaper article
Well,
said
see, I never did know that till I was older. And Dad never did talk about nothing about that.
Okay.
My dad was about 5 years old when that happened, and he did not mention it in his life. I never did ask him nothing about it because I didn't know.
Yeah, but I think you've got the newspaper article. It's public knowledge
right.
now.
Yeah, right. And so
And it goes back, that lineage goes back, it goes, all the way back to Andrew, Nathaniel, Jacob, and then all the way back to Frederick Wise.
Yeah, right.
Which came over on the ship Nancy.
we got that book. We went over to the graveyards.
Yeah, and Frederick Wise, now he was born in 1733, and Frederick died in 1807. So in the 1700s, he and his brother came over on the ship Nancy.
Right.
And they got 1 square mile of land from the King of England.
Right.
Up at
right,
Bethpage area.
Right.
And there's still Wise Road up there.
Right.
And so the King of England granted those brothers, and there's stories about later, one was for the British and the other one was for the U.S., and they kind of had some differences there.
Yeah.
But I think they made up or whatever, and then one of them was supposed to be hung for treason, but he got out of that.
They pardoned him.
They
He got
pardoned
a
him.
pardon. I read that.
Okay, so...
But see, our grandmother Wise was a Holman. Her husband killed him. Killed her father.
Okay, well, it's...
And they burnt the house down. And the house, I could show you up there someday where the house was. It was on out there a little bit.
Okay.
The house that they built back wasn't right there. It was just a little piece out there where they had a barn and everything. And see, back then, growing up, wheat thrashers, they called them the wheat thrashers, they came around and worked your wheat, and you got wheat for grain. And you had an old house there, a house where you kept your granary, you know. And they'd come and work all day, and you fed them at night. And they got so much of the grain for doing the work.
Now, did you ever pick cotton?
Very little.
You didn't like
Hardest work I ever tried to do.
You didn't like it?
No.
So,
I hated to pick cotton. But the Lindharts were good friends of ours out there. And they were some wild drivers out there too. One of them Lindhart boys, he'd go up there to that Lutheran church, Bethpage, and it'd dirt in, and he'd go up there like in the afternoon and just circle around there and boil smoke, dust just flying everywhere.
Now, after the plastering business, I think in 1964, you started with Carolina Freight. So tell us a little bit about the Carolina Freight days. And you drove a truck from 1964 to 94.
Yeah.
30 years.
I was a city boy that never had even been in a truck. And it got to where the plastering business was playing out. People went to sheetrock. And it'd be like running a grocery store and people quit eating. You wouldn't have nothing to sell. And so I had a lot of friends in Cherryville that I played golf with and got to know that worked at Carolina Freight. I went down there, and Mr. T.D. Gurley was the head man back then. And he was a friend of mine. He told me, son, I said, I've never been in a truck. And he told me to go to Raleigh, truck driving school, for 4 weeks. And he said, we'll put you on driving. So I went down and I became a truck driver to leave somebody else out. And I became a truck driver, and I became a good one because I've always been a real observant person, Rusty. I drove 30 years and was never involved in an accident. And out here, I had one the other day, see?
Yeah, well, you're 91 now, so, you know, you've...
Yeah, I know that, and I've got to be...
a little bit more careful.
Yeah, I know it, you know, and I'm so lucky to be 91 and still get around.
Yeah.
I done buried all my classmates. I got 3 or 4 living, is all.
Yeah.
And these people here in Cherryville, I'm in better health, that's in their 70s, I'm in better health than they are.
Well, you're blessed.
I've been blessed and
have good health. Well, tell us a little bit about Carolina Freight. I mean, I know you got a Teamster shirt
but
on.
I want to tell who was...
You can talk about whatever.
Connie Wise.
I'm getting there.
Connie Wise helped me so much. She helped me grow up. I was a wild 18-year-old boy, and we went to school together. And when we got out, Connie was working at the shake shop. And I got to dating Connie, and we got married. And I never will forget, I told Dad, I said, Dad, I'm going to have to get married. And he said, you got that girl pregnant? I said, no, Dad, I'm in love with her. Okay. And people, a lot of men can't say they in love with somebody. I could.
Now, how many years were y'all married?
70 years. And
now, what year did you get married?
19, and I believe it was about 49 to about 49. We finished 49, 52 long in there.
So you finished school in 1949.
Connie went to Bob Jones one year, and I went to NC State, and we both quit and got married.
Okay.
And Connie grew up at the Dory Mill Village, had wonderful, there were no better people in Cherryville than Mill Village because the majority of the people, that's where they worked, see? You didn't have no car. You walked to work, to school, to church. The only people on the Mill Village that had a car would be the boss man.
Wow.
See, the school, you worked, well, the Mill Village, most people, they lived at the Mill Village. You didn't have to walk far.
So when
See, Connie lived right behind the mill.
Yeah, so everyone just walked around and walked to downtown.
And what they
or
done,
uptown. Yeah.
Connie had two brothers. She had two sisters and a brother. And her mother and dad worked different shifts to look after them children, night and day, see?
Now, my mom, she grew up and, her father was Otis Ledbetter.
Ledbetter, right. And that was a different story,
Yeah,
about.
and that was over at over in Shelby area,
Yeah,
Waco
Bill,
area.
not Waco, but over at the other area.
Buffalo.
Buffalo.
Creek. Yeah, Buffalo.
And that was a tragic. They could have made a movie about that.
Well, I know. I mean, if you look at your lineage, it's Otis Ledbetter was her dad. Now, growing up, A.C. Turner was her dad.
Right. So she didn't know it.
I know. Later in life, she found out.
Hank was married, Rusty.
But that Otis Ledbetter
Was her birth dad.
Yeah, and
He was killed.
Yeah, tell us about that story.
Well, what it was Miss Turner was courting this Otis Ledbetter. That's about, I guess, 16 years old, something along that. And so Connie's mother, Mitty Turner, she got pregnant. Mm-hmm. So the father, the brothers of the man that got her pregnant, they come to see the Turner family to make sure they was going to get married. And I don't know, maybe they was going to get married and whatever. And they had guns. And they come up to the Turner house, and the Turners came out with guns. They were all standing out there, and they started walking toward each other, and they started shooting, and Connie's birth dad got killed, was shot and killed right there.
By his own dad?
Yeah.
And then he later, about a year later,
he killed his dad. He committed suicide.
Yeah, but these stories, it's almost like a TV movie.
I know it.
On both sides.
Yes.
It's kind of
Lord, I know it.
Very interesting stories, tragic stories, but stories that need to be told, really.
Sure.
I mean, history is history, and a lot of history is suppressed, but later in life, a lot of times that comes out.
See, I didn't know nothing about this till me and Connie was done married. I didn't know that.
But there's a newspaper article about that, and I think the Shelby Star.
Yeah, sure. I went over and got it. Me and Connie went to the library. You can go to the library and get anything that's in the paper.
Yeah.
And get it reprinted.
But that's over there between Waco and Shelby. It's at Buffalo Church over there. Yeah.
And I asked the Eagle man the other day, the old man, I said, I'd like to have them old eagles.
Some of them are here in the museum, but a lot of them, I think, are in storage.
He said they took them. See, I used to come up here.
They're in storage.
I used to come up here and go in there, and Creel and Fred Hauser would let me sit back there and look at them. And I'd go over them and see one of them eagles, it had on the front page, Ms. Hillard Wise dies, on the front page of the Eagle. You think I would like to have it?
Mrs. Hillard White, you're talking about your mom?
My mother.
Oh, your mom. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I'd like to talk about Connie Wise, my mom, and your wife.
Well, Connie Wise went to school together. She grew up on the Dory Mill Village, and we met each other in school. We didn't date. Till we got out. Connie weighed about 99 pounds.
When you got married?
When she finished school.
Oh, okay.
We didn't get married a couple years later. She started putting on got a little fleshier, got better looking. And I started dating her and fell in love. We fell in love with each other. And we got married, Presbyterian Church Manse. the preacher's house back in. They called the manse. George Riddle married us one afternoon, and Dad gave me $50, my wedding gift. And I had he bought me a new 49 Ford when I finished high school. I was one of the only young men around here that even had a car, and I had a new car. And
didn't you say you had Venetian blinds in the
had a Venetian blind in the rear window. We had a Cherryville drive-in theater over there. You know where the home folks is? People don't know that. I mean, where the food line is.
Yeah, there was a movie theater there.
Yeah, people, Lord, I've talked to people over there and they didn't know it.
I've got a picture here that I know you'll recognize that I found here at the museum, and that's you and Mom. And one of the things she did, she was the former, she started the Cherryville Area Ministries.
Sure.
And it says...
Right up here.
And she founded in 1985 the Cherryville Area Ministries, which in 1985...
You know where she started off at?
Yeah, it's right across from City Hall, I think.
Post office.
Oh, was it the post office? Yeah, on the corner
post office,
there.
and then out, bottom of the post office, then out here.
Yeah.
And
So, this Connie T. Wise, Connie Turner Wise, was founder, 1985, Cherryville Area Ministries.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But y'all got married, and you said my mom worked at the grocery store, like Tillman's grocery store, I think it was.
We had a grocery store at one time across from City Hall, where that building is right there. That was a grocery store.
Yeah, and it was called Pacemaker.
Had a pacemaker, right.
Yeah, Pacemaker.
Then had a John Black. He was a man from the country that come up here and started a food store. John Black. And Connie worked for years and years, and I tell you who else worked there was C.J. Beam's wife. I believe Connie, one time, she started off working out at the Middlebrooks Jewelry is where you paid your phone bill.
Oh, okay.
That's where you paid it.
Oh, you paid the phone bill there.
Yeah, right.
Where did you pay the power bill? At the post office?
The power bill, I don't know. You had to pay it at City Hall. And then I come up here one day when there's some straps here.
Yeah.
And they had a little strap get together. See, Uncle Hector, he worked out to Dory Mill. And he was still living there when me and Joe were at the LS. He done got married, and he didn't live there, see. And his wife, Barbara, was a school teacher. Barbara Hill Strap.
Well,
She came to Cherryville before she ever got married.
Now, after y'all got married, you had your first child, which was Cheryl.
Right, Cheryl.
Sister.
Cheryl Wise McGinnis.
And then 6 years later, I think you had Hillard B. Wise III, which is Butch Wise, my brother.
Then we thought we'd quit.
Oh, was I a mistake?
We signed off.
I snuck in there.
You know, they used to say the ideal family is a boy and a girl.
Okay.
So we thought we had them till you come along.
So I was a surprise. Was that good or bad?
Oh, you was a blessing to Mother. Mother loved you so much. And she wouldn't admit, but I guarantee your mother loved you to death.
I know she did. She did.
And not that she loved Cheryl and Butch, but she was like a different generation, you know.
Yeah. Now unfortunately, she passed away 2 years ago. And
Lord, she took you to band practice, church, and everywhere else.
Yeah.
The Boy Scouts.
Yeah, Boy Scouts and church.
They stuff upstairs, Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
I got a picture of me up there. You ever seen it?
Yeah, your
me and Joe.
Cub Scout or Boy Scout uniforms up there, your shirt.
Yeah, I brought it up here.
Yeah, I think it's your Cub Scout shirt that's up there.
A cap, too.
Is it a cap? You got a cap up there? So. But you like history. I mean, you know a lot about Cherryville. I mean, you talk about a lot of stories that I've never heard before.
See, the thing about the Boy Scouts, the only Boy Scouts in Cherryville was at the Presbyterian Church. And right behind the church was a little building. and that was a scout hut, and the church. It was. We had our scout meetings there. Well, back then, the nicer of the people belonged to the scouts. I mean, there wasn't many Mill Village boys that belonged to the scouts. We was all uptown. Town people.
Okay. So I guess there were different classes of people in Cherryville.
We were.
Okay.
But we all got along. We had ball teams. We had the Howell, the Carlton, all left. I played for the Howell, and I was a all-star shortstop. I never will forget. Lord, I loved playing ball, and
now you loved Legion baseball. You go to all the games. I mean, you probably know more about Legion baseball than anyone.
Sure, and look, we hauled it. Look, years ago, me and E.C. Sullivan Jr. that run Ford Place, we'd go pick up the players, bring them to practice. They didn't have no van or nothing back then. You had to go get them. Parents or friends or whatever had to haul them in. And
how many Legion games have you been to? Probably thousands.
Look, we had boys from Lincoln. We had one boy from Mooresville, and we had one boy that played for Lincoln was a general, and I forgot his name right now. Well, Cherryville seen a good boy out there somewhere, Mooresville somewhere. They went and housed him at Beams Inn.
Oh, okay, so
that was his domicile.
So he lived there.
You played ball
where you live.
Where you live, see.
Okay. Now you're a good golfer too. Tell a little bit about your golf. You was a good golfer.
Yeah, I played golf. I must have started in the 90s playing golf.
No, you started way before that. You was playing golf in the 70s. You and I played in the 70s, father-son.
Well, I got my years mixed up, but see, I never was on a golf course. I never had seen no golf played.
But you had to start, you started playing golf about the time you started driving a truck. It had to be not long after that, late 60s.
Well, I was driving a truck when I played golf.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You started playing golf in the 60s. Because we were members of the golf club and Carolina.
But I want to tell you about the Cherryville Country Club.
Okay.
We lived on the Roy Acre Road. The house where Richard Newton lived, where you turn to go down, that wooden house right there, real nice, that was the Albert Holman house. And we lived there when I was in the first grade.
Okay.
And I walked down to the country club and watched them build it with scoops and horses. Wasn't no bulldozers. They used drag pans. It was like a wheelbarrow.
They were building a swimming pool.
Right. Yeah. I went down and watched them. I was just a little boy, and I'd go down and watch them. I was in the first grade.
But that was a camp at one time, wasn't it?
Camp, they had Camp Russell in the summer.
Oh, okay.
Me and Joe went because we lived at, people lived at the mills got to go to Camp Russell, see?
So I guess the Russells originally built the country club?
Yeah, they built it, but
and then Cedar Black ran it, and his wife Betty.
They bought that property, and I'm trying to think, but Ray Jenkins, he ran that place one time down there, and
then right across, which is now the country club, they combined it was Carolina Freight.
Yeah, Club Carolina.
Club Carolina.
Club Carolina.
And all the Carolina Freight employees were members of Club Carolina. Was you automatically a member, or did you have to pay dues to join Club Carolina?
You belong to Club Carolina.
If you were a employee?
Yeah, well, you wanted to. It didn't matter where you lived.
Okay, yeah.
See, us people in Cherryville, we had an advantage over somebody that lived in Charlotte. See?
So out of thousands of employees,
all of them had to belong. They had to all join.
Oh, okay.
We had a couple of them lived at Asheville.
Oh, okay.
They still had to join, pay dues.
But now you started playing golf probably in the late 60s and 70s, because I remember you playing golf in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And you were a good golfer. You won a lot of tournaments.
I won, and
you were a good golfer.
I never will forget it. We was down, we had like a big dinner down at Grandmother Straps, and Uncle Pete, black welder, he was a wheel at Carlton Mill. And he was a friend of Ben Rudelsville now. He knew all the Rudelsvilles, you know. And he said, "You ever played any golf?" And I said, "No." He said, "I believe you would like golf." He took me down there one day and started me playing. And I never will forget, we had a pro down there. We had a house down there. When you first go down to that little bridge, back left in the woods was a wooden house. Where the golf pro lived. George Bergen was his name.
So
and I guarantee people wouldn't know that name. George Bergen.
George Bergen.
He come from Lincoln, and he was a golf pro, and he gave the golf lessons, and he run everything, and which was too much nowadays, you know. But back then, he looked after the club and the golf. See, he looked after everything, and Lord, we had such great parties down there. We'd get an orchestra, you know, to play Christmas, you know, and different holidays. And there's one holiday, club said they wasn't going to get one. Well, me and Connie and some of the rest of them, we got us one. We paid for it ourselves. And then one time we just had records playing, you know. We just played records and danced. And I never will forget one night. Joe Van Dyke, you ever heard that name?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Well, I went to school with him. But Joe and Kathleen was his wife that worked with Connie. She's still living. I talked to her the other day, good looking woman. And she ain't been with another man since he died. And I had her out there in the car one night. Wasn't doing a thing, sitting in there talking in her car. And we was parked down there close to the pool, and we had our clothes on and everything. We were just sitting there talking. I wasn't trying to make out with her or nothing. We were just talking. And Joe, her husband, come out. He seen us, and he dived into the swimming pool.
Why'd he do that?
I don't know.
Was it cold?
Hell, he ought to come over and jerk the door out and pop me is what he should have done.
Oh, wow.
But I knew Joe all my life. I went to school with him. I can remember about the fourth grade, third or fourth, the teacher sent me down to Joe's house to tell his mother Joe was playing hooky.
Okay. Why seeing you?
Because I was
Mouth of the South.
Yeah.
You like to talk.
I was a good little boy. I made good grades and no cussing. I didn't cuss, and was brought up Christian family. But as you get older, you get out of some of your good habits. You get into bad habits.
Well, it sounds like Cherryville was a really close-knit
It
town.
was, and look,
you know, people didn't venture off very far.
And a great thing about Cherryville, too, the church was a great part of your life. The church. Presbyterian church, we had picnics and get together, had young people's meetings. And, you know, years ago, before so much transportation, that's where people met.
Well, today, you know, people meet on social media
Yeah.
and internet. But years ago, for socialism, you went to church,
across the creek,
or the barbershop.
And you met your spouse or your mate, maybe by just going to town or to church.
I think that may be why some church attendance is down, because you can get your socialism, you know, social networking away from church, whereas before, you know, most communities were built off church.
Look, years ago, I know if you was wanting a good lady to date, It'd be somebody that went to church.
Yeah.
See?
That makes sense. Was there anything else you'd like to say? I think we've covered.
We're still on air?
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
Well,
anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I don't know. God has blessed me with health and wealth. At my home, I got anything. I got golf carts. I got a nice home. I got a truck. I got a car to drive. I got about 3 carports, a couple acres of land, and what is so great, I got people that helps me. I got a caregiver. I got a lady. And I got a handy man and a handy woman that looks after me every day. And I have been blessed. And growing up, I was a smart little, I wasn't no good little boy. I made good grades in school though.
Well, is there any words of wisdom you'd like to share with us? What is success? I mean, success is not always money. Success is not always materialistic things. Success was probably your marriage to my mom for 70 years.
I was brought up in a Christian home, and after my mother died, we lived with the Straps, and Aunt Sudie Strap, Grandmother Strap, and Aunt Ruby. Every time they opened the door, we were there. Church was a great part of our life growing up. Mm-hmm. We had picnics. That's where a lot of men, boys and girls met each other.
That's sure.
And then you had Bible school. And what was so great, every day you'd get a little ice cream treat. See, you didn't get that at home during the week. You didn't get no nuts and apple and oranges. Every year at church, at Christmas, give you a little brown bag, have orange, apple, nuts, candy, and it was a treat. We called it a treat.
That's like once a year you got that kind of stuff. You didn't get it all year long.
But what amazes me is those cherry trees and over at Grandmother Straps. So and they had apple trees.
So I guess Cherryville used to have a lot of cherry trees.
Yeah, and
I know they planted some, but I didn't realize that
they had big cherries on them.
And y'all ate the cherries on them. Okay.
And they made cherry pies.
Well, that's how Cherryville got its name, was because of the cherry trees.
See, those trees produced. And we had apples, peach trees, blackberries, and garden. We didn't live, just as far as here, a couple blocks to Grandmother Straps.
Yeah.
And we had a big garden like out in the country.
But it
had a barn.
It was close.
Had a horse. I had a cow, hogs, had everything right there in town. Yeah. And back then you could have it all. You couldn't bring your cow uptown, you know. But
well, do you remember horses being uptown?
I remember horses and Lord, I met over at Grandmother Wise's. I rode a wagon several times from there to Lincoln on a wagon. Okay. Lord, you talk about a rough ride.
On a wagon.
And look, some of the wagons had a metal wheel. God, you talk about rough. Lord, it was rough riding.
Going to Lincoln on a covered wagon, that'd be rough.
We had 15 to 20 of us in school that were close knit. Mm-hmm. We kept up with each other. We had parties, and now we all did. Eloise Dellinger is one of the ladies that's still living, and Perry Brown. Perry Brown came here up from Kings Mountain, and in about the 7th, 8th grade, he didn't grow up in Cherryville, and moved over there behind your place. His dad worked for a light company. His dad used to drive one of that big trucks.
Oh, okay.
I've enjoyed talking to you, and I'm a person that I enjoy life. I like to live. I like to go, and I like to help people. I've helped a lot of people in Cherryville.
I know you've helped a lot of people. And a lot of
I've,
people you haven't told who you've helped.
There's a couple people, I put a roof on their houses, and I bought 2 ladies some automobiles to drive, and I love to have money to help people.
Yeah, you've helped a lot of people. A lot of
And people don't know
that.
People don't know what you do.
Yeah, but you.
And see, my trouble for years has been my mouth, bad and good.
Yeah.
See, I guess it'd be so good to have a mouth and just talk when you wanted to, but I get in trouble with my mouth. If I see something that ain't right, I speak out.
I know.
I'm the person that if I see something happening down here, I'm going to go find out what is happening, what's going on, and I enjoy life. And what Connie Wise was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. What is so great, 2 people to get along have got to enjoy the same things.
Yeah.
You can't have one person, I don't like the beach, does that, I don't like the mountains.
Anything else you'd like to say about that? We pretty well covered about everything, I think.
No, I'm just so glad that I grew up in a little place like Cherryville, where everybody, starting off, everybody knew everybody, and people would help each other, and it was a wonderful place to live, and there were so many people. We were a mill village, mill town. People worked in the mill, and they.
All right, well, we'll close it up here.
Okay.
Well, today on Wise Wednesday, we had Hillard Wise. We really appreciate him coming on the show today. Hillard and Dad, thank you